What is up, guys? It is your boy Anaki, aka the Teching of My Hero Academia YouTube, minus the cringe factor, I think. So, as you guys can tell, we finally got the layout established. We got my chair with its lovely back support, also matching my microphone, mouse, laptop, headphones, Xbox controller, etc. We've got the My Hero Academia volumes behind me, the school brief volumes that I'll be reading soon. I actually put them on the case before I read them. We got, the figures, everything. Finally got a proper setup. More than that, we finally have natural lighting, all around upgrades to the channel. Let's get into the chapter though. One of the things, this chapter is one of those where the tension is building, we're invested, and there's no action. It's about who these people are, and I love when Horikoshi shows us how he can keep us engaged and keep us interested and invested with little to no action and mostly character interactions. So we start off getting the revelation that Endeavor's been having a dream lately where it's the kids and his wife at the table, but he's never with them. At the same time, though, the thing that he seems to care about most right now, more than his status even as the number one hero, seems to be his family, which is an important and necessary step within his character arc, but also, again, was one that all of us who are diligently and actually paying attention to the series saw coming. I am in no way actually, yes, I am, because people are claiming that this is being forced, and this is kind of disturbing. It's been set up. The Todoroki family arc has not been established, and we actually get something really big that I've actually seen a complaint about. That means we're almost guaranteed to have it addressed within the context of the story now, because the foreshadowing is established. All right, let me hop in. We get, boom. Turns out the kids are staying at the barracks. Important detail, tiny bit of world building. Some hero agencies actually have outright barracks. Ta-da! Which I think is actually a very important point, because if they have barracks where people sleep, that means some people are like 24/7 actually like heroes in the same level of to the degree of firefighters that live like at the fire station. We haven't gotten this detail yet. It didn't seem like Cinder Peter or Bubble Girl had to live at the Night Eye agency. So far, no other agency has given the impression that the people actually have to live there. Obviously, Fat Gum's takoyaki desk grill situation could lead to you to believe that maybe he lives there, but also it just kind of seems to be like a gag within his character. So there's like the first hard confirmation that some hero stations are borderline like army bases that just keep active duty soldiers. I mean, we already knew that they were like a 24-hour agency, but the fact they have full-blown barracks that people don't just go home, nice touch. We get the establishment that the kids are making progress within this past week. Bakugo states that he's the one who was making that progress. And so I think it's nice and nobody refutes that. Instead, Todoroki says it's because he's under practice and using his ice and his fire. And Deku says, but I feel like, which means yes. So what's essentially happening there is saying, yeah, this is why I'm not as fast or as close as you, Bakugo. And Deku is saying, but in spite of the fact that we were not as close or as fast, I think all of us are improving and getting closer. We get Vernon observing the kids' gloves, and we see, or costumes, and you see that she's mostly teasing them as a means of motivation, which we kind of already figured out. But not only that, we see that she's actually appreciative and acknowledging the hard work. We get the three of them, the origin trio, in a panel as they're trying to keep up with Endeavor. And one of the main things that I think is worth pointing out here is that I think in the last chapter, Bakugo talks about how it takes him a while to start up in the winter. Here we see Bakugo doing something that looks like he's holding his hands together. I don't think that's him necessarily charging an attack. I think that's him making it a point to keep low intensity explosions going at all times now, so that his hands are always ready. That's actually something that I kind of wanted Bakugo to do. I never really talked about it because it seemed like an insignificant detail. But in this moment, I think that Horikoshi was just like letting us know that, yeah, he's actually making it a point to keep his hands prepped now, because you will not have excuses. If somebody dies, somebody dies. They don't care that he didn't have his hands primed. We just get Endeavor explaining moreover like how subconscious like the move choice needs to be, and I actually agree. Like when you're moving at near max, when you're breaking the sound barrier in your sneakers, you need to have those moves on autopilot. You need to be able to just instantly kind of throw them out, because the faster, more aggressive you are, the less time you have to react. It's literally more about like, no, you have a mental limit in the same way we were talking about the hardware, it's kind of Horikoshi fleshing out and giving more context to the capacities of the people. We understand that once you get to like Mach speed, you need to rely on reflexes. That just makes sense, honestly. Anyway, well, besides for people like Hawks who have S plus technique, so the chances are Hawks at Mach plus speed is still, actually thinking about what he's doing, especially when you think about the amount of detail put into his feathers. Or you could argue that Hawks is the epitome of parallel processing and that he's even better at it than Endeavor, but his quirk is more utility based in power, and that's why Endeavor is technically more successful. But again, Endeavor has also been around for considerably longer. Hawks is only 22. All right. We get more insight into Endeavor, though. His thoughts overall is that he's realized he's been executing family the wrong way. We all know that, but not only is he acknowledging that his abuse and like tyrannical tactics were the wrong way, but in addition to that, he's more or less been never taking the hero costume off. He's always been thinking about being Endeavor and not thinking about being Engie. So the fact that he's even got it as like a revelation of his own self-awareness goes to the extent that he didn't even really have a self outside of hero work, and that's part of what corrupted his ability to process how he should be raising his family. Now, we instantly after all this get cut away to the it's dinner time. We get Bakugo going, why? Which I love, because Bakugo is often like chiding people and like, oh my god, you guys need to da 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 da. Like, and when it comes to like combat, all these other things, it's like he's like the most level-headed, intellectual one that we constantly see. Yes, Deku is also intellectual, but like Bakugo's analysis are usually boom, done. This is what it is. This is how it's going to be. And whereas Deku's usually comes with like a whole paragraph of analysis because he's got to think through so many steps. Anyway, Bakugo again playing into the "we're not friends" gag. At this point, we have the fully established gag running of Shoto the himbo, Deku the otaku, essentially, and Bakugo is now like a full-blown tsundere. I personally think he needs to just admit that he cares about people. He's just really bad at it and doesn't like admitting it to himself yet. But I also think that has to do with how he was raised a bit, where aggression was like the dominant way of expression. So that'll be something that I hope his character arc, especially if we ever get a mission with him and Kirishima where he gets like better at expressing that, that's most likely where if we're going to ever see that progress, that's probably going to be the dynamic that pushes it along. Fuyumi is just a lovely person this chapter, by the way. Just excited to see everyone, invites everyone's over. We get information that Natsu actually used to cook, only for it to turn into... Okay, this chapter, if I'm being honest, was way more hilarious than it should have been to me personally, because while I actually like understood the tension and the stakes of the situation, I've actually like, been around people where I can hear their family talking, or people that don't know that I know certain aspects, and then had them, take these shots at each other when I'm technically not supposed to know what's going on. And anybody who's ever lived that situation probably could crack a smile at least at these interactions, even though the overall overarching what was actually happening was very, very intense. With Natsu essentially bringing up hey, remember you were a creativity stifling father, and Deku and Bakugo being like, oh shit, are we gonna do this? Are we doing this right now? With the Bertolt treatment. And Natsu's just kind of like, look, man, I sat at the table, I ate food, I gotta go. And I just love the consistent emphasis, the way Horikoshi's been doing it with just the ding, like Bakugo and Deku being like, he's definitely awkward because of getting his ass beat. Harsh mood. And then, everybody's cleaning up. And we finally, which this is also something that we all knew, or at least I always knew, was going to come to a head in the same way that Bakugo talking to Deku about One for All came to fruition in chapters around 116, 117, during the provisional license arc. Bakugo accidentally hearing this conversation finally comes into play because Deku finally gets to talk to him about whether or not he knows. And he goes on to explain that, you guys kind of just were talking in front of me, and I found out, whatever. And the other thing, though, is this is another reason I like... Okay, you need to make sure you read official scans, because the Bakugo and Deku interaction here makes him sound a lot more mouthy in like the J-Box and manga streams, whereas here He's like, huh, of course I did, since you two were yapping in the hallway, and like he sounds aggressive. And then he goes, I mean, comma, yeah. Like the pause there creates hesitance. It shows like actual concern and like understanding that it's an awkward situation and an intense one. Whereas the manga stream, J-Box vibe always gives it more of a, like he's just like a flippant asshole. And I think that's where like a lot of the disconnect in some of the ways the community perceives Bakugo at this point is coming from. But anyway, moving forward though, I like even more how this is emphasized though. This is even more emphasized because like J-Box made it seem like a lot more goofy, or not necessarily goofy, but it didn't emphasize what Bakugo was really going for to me when I was reading the the fanlations of this, because we get Shoto talking about what happened with his mom and the burn and how he's always ascribed that to be his father's actions ultimately. This is one of those controversial things, but I do not agree with Shoto doing that. However, it is something that it makes sense to do from the standpoint of it is true that it is caused by the trauma inflicted. So it is in a secondhand degree, yes, that is endeavor inflicted. However, it is important to remember that we are all, especially as adults, accountable for our actions. And just because we are harmed in a toxic and abusive way, as a person who's grown up with that toxic kind of environment, you cannot perpetuate pain cycles. So while it is nice that Shoto forgives Rei, it is important to understand that part of the reason that makes that work as a narrative piece is because she understands still that that's still wrong. She understands she still needs to make sure that that's not happening. And the thing that's really important here is that Rei has been leaving the hospital. She's been making moves going around outside. I mean, she's interacting with the world. I've actually seen people complain about how, oh, the Endeavor plot would be trash if Rei never gets addressed. But the reality is that here in this chapter, we're discussing the possibility of her getting out sometime soon and her being able to sit and have dinner with Natsu, Fuyumi, and Shoto, and with Endeavor being considered having this dream where he's constantly not there. I think we could argue that what he's seeing is essentially a future or the foreshadowing of what's to come when he's dead. I think we need to interpret that. We don't need to, but I think that dream is another one of those death flags that Horikoshi's given us to let us know that peace will come to the family of the Todorokis, but it's probably going to come at the cost of Endeavor's life. Then again, also, before I just skip past it, we get to the point that I was talking about, though, where Bakugo says you're not supposed to expose your dirty laundry to the desk. That's a guest. Also, do you have any more dishes you need washed? I don't remember exactly how it was phrased in J-Box, but it definitely didn't come off as him being like, guys, like I understood what it was supposed to be, but some people just kind of thought it was like a goofy him like trying to shit on them interaction. I'm like, no, what like his character is like trying to do here is like, look, if you want to be, not upset about what's going on with your family and you don't want these issues to ruin dinner like Fuyumi was talking about, then you can't just sit around and talk about them just because the guest happened to walk out of the room with the dishes. That's not how it works. And then he even like goes on and like Deku's like he told us, and like Bakugo, the thing is that I kind of feel like Horikoshi missed an opportunity when he gave him an E out of or an E in language, when I kind of would have loved if he would have gotten like an A+ in bullshit detection or like an S in that, because as far as like bullshit scouters go, Bakugo is like number one in the series. It's, like I don't know anybody who's like, and he's also just not mincing words. He's like very honest about it, which I actually appreciate. He's like, nope, I overheard. I did not have a direct conversation with Shoto. I overheard it. Because he's not going to pretend like things aren't what they are. And that's something that I've actually, the more the series progresses, the more I respect Bakugo for it. Just because it allows for us to not have so many semantic games played when the plot or conversations around him need to move. Bakugo can always get the point across and keep the conversation going, which is actually a very necessary narrative tool. Like a legitimate reason for conversations being to the point is that Bakugo is very to the point, and it doesn't require a character break for anybody else or anything like that to get the conversation moving faster. And then we get to Deku essentially saying that he believes Endeavor is preparing to Shoto is preparing to forgive Endeavor. Now, the thing about that is that is very much what was set up essentially at the end of the Pro Hero arc, where he says, I still need to see what kind of father you can be, because everything Natsu said is true. And again, like that was brought up again, I still agree with the tension and those negative feelings. And even Fuyumi admits this, which I actually found relief in, because she's not hopelessly starstruck as some people like to like paint it as, where they're like, oh, it's just another female character. No, she does have her reservations. She just values having her family, having peace and happiness more than she is angry. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that of all of them, she's the most emotionally mature and healed, which she's also the oldest. So that kind of makes sense. And Endeavor overhears the discussion about how Shoto's more or less waiting for the right time, and we finally see what that shrine was, where Fuyumi was praying, and where Enji chooses to go is the shrine to Toya. They've, as far as they know, and we thought about this back in the Pro Hero arc again when he said, what about the futures that I cut short? And we see Toya with a very similar hair aesthetic to Dabi in this video. I mean, not in this video, but in the picture. And so, yeah, obviously the Dabi theorists are going nuts, which is reasonable. And with this, all I can really say is people who are upset about it being very predictable, there's a technique that's existed since playwriting times where characters would intentionally fourth wall break. Any plays you've read that occasionally you would see the phrase aside, like in parentheses next to a line, meant that the character would like technically speak to the audience and kind of go, hey, I know that they're trying to trick me, but this is going to work out. This is actually used very well in the play called Titus by Shakespeare, where Titus Andronicus is essentially a Roman general who is being betrayed and set up like to fall and having his like family killed off. And essentially what happens is that his daughter is assaulted, has her hands cut off, has her tongue cut out so she can't tell on the people who did it or write letters about or write who did it to her. And eventually they figure out that it was the emperor's adopted, new stepchildren that did it. So they appeared to Titus because they think he's crazy, and they pretend like they're spirits from death. And what Titus does here is he is like, yes, spirits of revenge and suffering, I want you to come with me. Yes, you can help me, because they think he's crazy. And then Titus leans over to the audience and basically says, I know that these are the two brothers that I want. So let's see what happens. And from there, the rest of the scene still plays out. They're talking to each other, but the audience knows what's about to come for sure. By the way, he ends up killing both the boys, chopping them up, making meat pies out of them, and feeding them to his to their mom and dad. So that's what happens there. Sorry, I spoiled Titus for you, but you were never gonna read it. So in the same way, though, for us, we get to see these people and their whole and their heart, though, and the sadness they feel over Toya and how they feel like he's dead. And from their perspective, what's happening with him might be just far worse. If Dabi is truly Toya, then that means Toya is alive and he's a mass murderer, a serial killer, and not at all what the Todoroki family probably envisioned their, older brother doing. And that's going to be quite the emotional bond that we get to look forward to as an audience, because now we get to sit in suspense. And we get to know, or at least to the highest degree, expect this is what is coming. This Toya is going to be revealed to be Dabi. We don't know when, but apparently, according to the preview for the chapter next week, it's only going to get more gas in the fire, more skin to the pyre. Regardless, where we're headed, Horikoshi wants us to know, and that's okay. That's important. He wants us to understand and assume this so that we can, instead of being tense about who Toya is or whether or not this kid is just dead, instead the tension we can feel is waiting for them to find out the truth without any of the characters having to do like a cheeky, Dabi secretly Toya. Instead of us getting a reveal that Toya is like a Todoroki because he's talking about it or something like that, out of character for him because he's shown to not open up. So there's He doesn't seem that attached, like, as friends with the league. So there's no viable means for which Dabi would reveal that he is Toya Todoroki to the family, except, there's just no reasonable conversation route for that to happen with. And so instead what we're getting is all the blatant foreshadowing and structuring so we can know it without being directly told it on screen in a way that's forced and contrived, but so we can actually still experience the tension of waiting for them to find out who their brother is. So that's what's happening here. It's an intentional literary technique. The fact that you're like, I know, is intended. Working as intended. So if you thought that was bad writing, you're feeling how you're supposed to feel. If you're feeling exactly what you're supposed to feel based on the writer's intents, that's good writing. So I'm going to end the video here. Going to see how long this takes to upload. I actually have to switch my internet provider because this current stuff is too slow. This might take 3 hours. It might take 4 hours. Who knows? You guys have a wonderful day, though, and just keep on keeping on. The reality is that this ended up being like slightly longer than I thought it would be, and by the time this video is, like, see towards the end of the video, it's getting darker. Fun fact, where I live right now, it gets to be night at 5 p.m. So that's what it's like to live in Wisconsin. You guys, it's 4:04 now. It might be complete nighttime by the time. It will definitely be night by the time this video is uploaded. Everybody have a wonderful day. Aniki out.